Hello everybody, welcome back to Screen Stars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 2021 horror film Bram Stoker's Van Helsing, a film that is written and directed by Steve Lawson, and it stars Charlie Bond, Tom Hendrick, Joe Street and Mark Topping. Now this film, essentially, for those of you out there, the best way to explain this film, for those of you out there who have seen the 1992 version of Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Gary Oldman version essentially, you've basically seen this movie. Now if you put your minds back to that movie, there is a section in that movie where Mina's best friend Lucy, who is back in England, is visited by Dracula, played by Gary Oldman, who feeds on her, and she slowly transforms into a vampire over a few sequences. Her fiancé and the doctor, who's played by Richard E. Grant, he calls on his friend and colleague Van Helsing, played by Anthony Hopkins, who comes in and helps to treat Lucy and ultimately makes the announcement that she is a vampire, etc., etc. And the whole sequence in the film, when you tie it all together, is maybe half an hour or so. Well, they've basically made a full film of that sequence here, and that is essentially the story we get here. Lucy has a mysterious illness. There is a doctor who was vying for her affections. She ultimately chose to marry somebody else, Arthur, mainly because he's rich. And the doctor, again, calls on Van Helsing to come and help him try and discover what this mysterious illness is. And slowly but surely, Van Helsing determines that she has been visited by the undead, and she will become the undead herself. So that is the movie, basically. It's an hour and 20 or an hour and 25 minutes of that section of the Bram Stoker's Dracula film, made here on a much smaller budget. In actual fact, it actually feels like a stage play, this film. There's very few actors. You just get these three main characters. You've got Van Helsing, the doctor and the fiancée, and then Lucy, who's bedridden for most of the film. It's just essentially those four characters, apart from the odd maid here and there. Throughout the whole thing, it would actually make quite a good stage play. I think what makes this film fairly watchable is there are some really quite good performances here. I think everybody puts in very watchable performances, especially Mark Topping as Van Helsing. Now, he's no Anthony Hopkins, but you can argue that the Anthony Hopkins version of this character was really over the top and very, very eccentric, but it is certainly a very watchable performance also. This is a much more grounded performance. He's more inquisitive, he's investigating, he is trying to do best by Lucy and the others, he's respectful, all that kind of stuff. He's the, proper English professor sort of thing. But ultimately, that's it. You get an hour and 25 minutes of that whole sequence. For me, I think if they had delivered the end, this film would have been better. Essentially, what I thought, when we actually get to the bit where Lucy, transforms, it was a bit of a letdown for me. It was a bit, cliched. You get the hissing vampire and all, it didn't feel very threatening. You didn't learn more about how she was infected. Ultimately, if you know the story, then you know it's Dracula, but it's never hinted at here, apart from right at the end of the film. We get an appearance from Mina, who was played by Winona Ryder in the Bram Stoker's Dracula version of the film. So it kind of hints that it's going to go further, potentially, with more of this story. But again, we've seen it before. We've seen the Francis Ford Coppola version. It's the superior version. There's no denying it. That film is a very, very good film. Very gothic, very interesting visually. I know it has its critics with some of the performances. I'm looking at you, Keanu. But this felt too much of a carbon copy of that film. Respectfully done, granted. I think they did it justice to some degree. You know, the sets looked good, the costumes, you know, worked. Some of the cinematography is interesting, even though some of the camera shots were a bit odd. You know, you get still shots of characters and the camera be waving about, and it, you know, it made you feel a little bit queasy, a bit seasick. I could understand them doing them kind of shots if there's like a confusing scene happening or a bit of chaotic stuff going on, but not when there's two characters kind of talking. So I think it just didn't make a lot of sense to me, some of that. And it simply put, you have to question why they felt this film needed to be made when it has been made before, and done much better. But if you've never seen the Bram Stoker's Dracula version, you will get, you know, you'll probably watch this and fairly, you know, be fairly entertained by it if you're quite a patient viewer. I think the posters are fairly misleading. You know, it shows like this kind of action orientated, you know, vampire flick. It isn't that at all. It's more of a drama than a horror. It is not scary in any way, shape or form, this film. It is very much more of a character piece and a drama that happens to be, you know, at the central core of it, a vampire story. So don't go into this thinking you're going to get, you know, Van Helsing, the Hugh Jackman version of Van Helsing lobbing heads off left, right and centre. You would be very, very disappointed. If you quite like slow-paced drama with, you know, the vampire lore sewn into it, and you're a fan of the, you know, 1992 Gary Oldman version, you'll find bits in this interesting, but ultimately it's a film that probably didn't need to be made, but the quality of it is good enough, I think, to give it a 5 out of 10. So that is my review for Bram Stoker's Van Helsing. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked this review, and of course I will be back on the channel with more reviews on Screen Stars very, very soon.